Thank you very much, Ambassador. Ladies and gentlemen, Happy New Year. This is a rather unique gathering, and I know there are individuals in this room who know the history of the NCRI, who've been very supportive of the organization. I want to take you down a brief personal trail. When I left the Department of Homeland Security, I was approached to support the NCRI. At the time it was called the MEK. Well, still the MEK does exist. And at the time, as Ambassador Broomfield mentioned, it was listed as an FTO, a foreign terrorist organization. Now, what you don't know during my tenure in the White House is that I met just about every morning, bright and early, with a group of people in the Oval Office to review a series of terrorist threats directed at Americans, American interest, both home and abroad. In the time that I was in Washington, D.C., from October of 2001 until I left in 2005, it's quite a long time, I must have been part of over 1,000 briefings and God only knows how many thousands of pages of terrorist threats. And the intelligence community would identify from the various sources where they thought those threats were coming from. I will tell you one of the reasons I decided to support the cause of the Iranian people was because the MEK was never appeared, not one day, on one memo, on one page, on one allegation that they were a terrorist organization. And since that time, this group, the support of the group, and it's really reflected to the individuals that are present here today. We've got the diplomatic corps, the military, the political. You should also know in the group of several hundred men and women, there are religious leaders and business leaders who all have embraced the cause of a free Iran, have all embraced and publicly supported the NCRI. Many of us have been privileged to meet with Madam Rajavi, and I have been privileged to meet with family members whose spouses, children, friends are among the 120,000 Iranian citizens who've been executed since the mullahs took over the culture of an extraordinary country, of extraordinary people, with an extraordinary history. A culture today is one of the most sophisticated in the world, with the most literate populations in the world, one of the youngest populations in the world, and they're still under the thumb of what some people in this town refer to periodically as a moderate regime. Well, I was asked one time what I thought about Rouhani and the moderate regime. Let's just go down our First Amendment. So I said to the individual that asked me about the moderate regime, I said, well, let me see. We have over 100 networks and television stations that can pretty much roam around the country. We've got papers all over the place. Talk to me about the freedom of press in the moderate regime. Are they free to go? Are they free to pepper? Are they free to just confront Rouhani on a regular basis with questions about his conduct, the administration's conduct, the Revolutionary Guard's conduct, political prisoners? So much for the moderate regime. Well, what about assembly? Is there freedom of assembly? Well, I think Senator Lieberman pointed out, I think there have been 8,000 to 10,000 people who have been arrested since the uprisings in December of 17. So much for assembly. And how about freedom of speech? Well, I'm afraid the notion of political dissent, protecting political dissent is a non-entity in this moderate regime. So this incredible cadre of men and women from across every spectrum of life in America have decided to make it our cause to do everything we can to embrace publicly and support Madam Rajavi and the NCRI. There will come a change. There will come a change. And it's not about going to the past with a monarchy, which wasn't exactly, no one could refer to it as a democracy in any manner, shape, or form. And it's certainly not the status quo. It's about liberty, equality, and I think Ambassador said it's the primacy of the vote. by those who choose to run and whom can be elected by the free, unimpaired vote of the men and women, the citizens of Iran. You know, I think back to some of those conversations with the most powerful conversations were with the mothers who have either loss of sons and daughters, and they've executed women as well as men, or their husbands. And why were they dragged into prison, and why were they tortured? Because they spoke out, they dissented, and they publicly called for, and then died for, the very notion of the liberties and privileges that we take advantage of every day. The freedoms and opportunities to speak, to assemble, to dissent, to challenge the government in a very respectful and responsible way. 120,000 people. That's not a silent revolution. That's a powerful revolution, a commitment to a cause that's greater than. So I like the notion of the new year and a new day. There will be a new day. But frankly, the broader global community, I think, has to do more. We applaud, I'm glad you mentioned President Trump. I mean, it's pretty clear where he and Secretary Bolton and others feel about the Iranian regime. But frankly, from my point of view, I'd like to see zero exports of energy. I think it'd be a great idea. You want to put pressure on a regime? And again, unfortunately, that means the Iranian people are going to suffer, but they're suffering right now. And you say, well, how do you know that? Well, I think inflation's at 40%, unemployment's 50%. The rial's lost 70% of its value. So you're going to put that pressure on. We continue to encourage both the president and the administration and the Congress to continue to sustain their public embrace. It's not a moderate regime. It's a ruthless, violent, totalitarian regime, and a new day will come. But will only come, not just we continue to gather like we have today and talk about it, but Congress and this administration need to continue to put on the pressure. I look General Jones's call on the broader international community to tighten the screws. Can you imagine? 65 times in the United Nations, the Iranian government has been condemned, and they're still in charge. But there's an alternative. There's a better way. There's a new way. That's the NCRI. That's Maryam Rajavi, where press, assembly, speech, dissent, tolerance, and a non-nuclear Iran can join the community of nations and blend its incredible culture and history and its literate and dynamic population into the broader community, global community. Thank you very much.